Hello, and welcome to today's episode of 52 Weeks of Health Equity with Conscious by Us. I'm your host, Tahitia Timmons. According to the CDC, health equity is the state in which everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. For us and many other institutions, health equity also involves the social determinants of health, which include poverty, discrimination, their consequences, including powerlessness, and the lack of access to good jobs, fair pay, quality education, housing, safe environment, and healthcare. What does this have to do with some of the people we talk to? Well, our podcast addresses how the world we live in shapes our access to health and how healthy we are, including our physical health and our mental health. We highlight stories from individuals and organizations who work to address these disparities and inequalities, and also have ideas about how we can have and live healthier lives. Today, I have Eddie Shyboogs Timmons, who's going to be talking about music, the music industry, and how, in certain ways, some of the features add to inequalities in how we access health and how we treat health and mental health. So without any further ado, Eddie Shyboogs, or Shyboogs, to introduce himself, who he is, what he does.
Hey, everybody, and thanks for that introduction, Taisha. Happy to be here on the podcast. My name's, like my sister said, my name's Eddie Shyboogs Timmons. I've been in the music industry for over, I would say, almost over 20 years now. I've worked in the production side, the artist side, audio engineering side, and now management side. And I've been fortunate enough to experience a lot of different scenarios in the music industry where, I do see a need for a focus on, mental health, which is what we're addressing today and talking about.
Yes.
So, it's great that society is opening up and they're more conscious to figuring out ways to address these issues that do affect, every industry that all of us work into. So, I'm really happy to be talking about that.
So in full transparency, and Shyboogs kind of let it out of the bag, Eddie Shyboogs is my brother. And so I have known him, since you first appeared on the planet. And out of the two of us, he was the more creative. And we started talking about mental health and the music industry with some stories that he would share with me about just what he was experiencing. And I thought, you're doing the production on the podcast. Why not talk about the music industry and have an episode just dedicated to the music industry and your thoughts about this? So one of the things that we've talked about often is, access and the roles that people play in the music industry. So when we think about mental health, what are some things that you've seen when it comes to just the setup in creative industries and the music industry, in particular when it comes to how sometimes, it can have some negative impacts on especially new artists?
Yeah, I think it's really expectations and bottom line, which ends up ultimately affecting new artists and new signees or anybody, coming into this industry. What these new artists are trying to reach an expectation. They all have goals. So, what that requires is obviously a lot of work, and especially on the social media side, because social media is what dominates now today, the music industry, whereas, it was different in the past. There wasn't such a push towards that way. So sometimes some of these artists, you didn't even know what they looked like. But now, because of social media, the listener and the fans in general are more involved. So labels And even independent, you're just required to do more. And obviously that puts a lot of pressure mentally on artists. So they have to think about what they're going to post, what they're going to say, what their opinions are going to be. And, and about, staying consistent. So you're constantly on people's feeds because the way things are being digested is like a mile a minute. So, that does put a lot of mental stress on artists. And it's really, again, the expectation, delivering, so it makes it a lot harder, on an artist that really just wants to focus on the music side. But now they have to deal with, micromanaging or being their own PR agent, so to speak.
Gotcha.
And so that is a lot to deal with. But the labels have started to put things in place and to deal with those factors. Obviously, labels do supply therapists, and they do try to do a good job of mentally supporting these artists that deal with that stress.
So it's interesting you talked a little bit about for artists, new artists coming in. And I think as someone not in the music industry or not in that type of creative space, I've always thought, oh, when someone gets signed, like it's like getting a job, right? Like, so these people are making all this money. And like in my mind, I always imagined they got health care and they got like health insurance and that they also got this like big amount of money instantaneously and were rich. And so like, why should I care about them? Because you're making all this money and now you're famous and you're covered and you're living this life that's better than mine. And then because you're in the industry and I get to like hear some of your stories, I started to realize, hey, like creatives don't get health insurance from what I understand. So I think the public probably has this like biased opinion that once you get a record deal or once you get a movie deal or once you get anything in the creative space, like you're just rich and balling and have all the benefits the general public has. Is that true or like not true? Like, do you have health insurance? Because like you have tons of followers and you're like a production engineer. And so how does that work really when you get like signed someplace?
When you get signed, I mean, essentially you're just getting a loan. What the labels are giving out to you is a loan. Healthcare and all these things aren't put into place at all. I mean, unless you're buying into them, which you could do as any citizen could buy health insurance, but essentially you're just getting a loan, and that loan is supposed to cover day to day while you're trying to reach those expectations that I was talking about earlier. So that loan goes to your rent, day to day living, etc. It's not, and and what happens from time is artists that aren't financially trained or don't have that support, they'll spend that money irresponsibly, and now you ran through that loan. And that's why you'll see artists working jobs. I remember I just recently saw an article about Frank Ocean writing a letter to himself because he was getting a job somewhere while he had his album Channel Orange coming out, which I think ended up winning a Grammy like the next year, but he was still struggling to pay bills. And all my friends in the industry, we talk about this all the time. On the outside perspective is like, oh, you work in the music industry, you drive a Ferrari, or you're in the Illuminati, or it's all these like fantasies because they don't know. But the actual truth of the matter is you're living day to day. You don't know what tomorrow is promised, because you don't have sick time. People that do work in the industry that do have A&R's jobs, their healthcare is decent, but there's probably better healthcare and public education and healthcare itself. So it's more a facade than anything. So the fame is there, but the financials aren't there. You have to really hustle and work, and you have to wear multiple hats in this industry just to sustain. So that's why you'll see moguls themselves, like Puff Daddy, who is almost a billionaire, but still an artist.
Right.
Still has liquor, still has clothing.
So it's like because I think there is this thought that fame brings some type of sense of security. And what I've since learned is that it's so much more complicated and complex than that. Like social media gives the appearance that people are living better than they are. And it's also, and I'm sure you've seen this, and I'm sure we've all felt it. Well, people that go into these public, because you pointed out something in the first part of this, like your conversation, you said back in the day you didn't have to worry about social media, and nobody even might have known what an artist looked like unless they saw them on tour or on a poster. Like now it's so much more nuanced, and we have so many more expectations. And then we say things to people like, well, you're famous, so you just have to suck it up. Like if it hurts in social media and people are not being nice to you, then you have all this fame and your money and you're rich, and we shouldn't care about you. Yet it's almost like you just have a bigger window in from the public side, but you're still struggling the same way that everybody else is. And so I really wanted to kind of highlight this from an access point, because we don't think about people that have tons and tons of followers on Instagram or YouTube as perhaps needing our compassion and our sense of, empathy, yes, when it comes to the things that they go through. Something happens and we automatically go, well, they're rich, so let's not feel sad for them, or they got these like big deals. But if I had to spread $1 million out or $5 million over the course of my entire life, I doubt that would last me unless I invested really well. And then thinking about like just health, and especially in the US, we don't have a system of socialized medicine or a all access system that is equitable for everybody. A single surgery for like let's say you're having your knee done or having just an injection or something could range anywhere between 50,000 to like 300,000 to have something done out of pocket. So if you don't have health insurance, that could just wipe out such a chunk of your monies. And then you said it's a loan. So it's almost like if I take that money, if I get sick and I'm not working and, I don't have health care, that could ruin you. So, it does sound like it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary to, even if I got sick or I had a mental health problem and I needed to get treatment, like, even though you did mention like a lot of the labels do provide therapists and stuff like that, like, what if I start to struggle? With the help, I wonder if some artists wonder if the labels would treat them differently if they were open with, hey, I'm having some issues or problems. Because I'll be honest, I haven't seen any artist say like I'm doing counseling, like I'm in a mental health crisis. And I'm sure it has to be ultimately very stressful to be an artist and doing all this other stuff.
Well, they're probably not being transparent, because I do feel like most artists in the industry are in therapy. I mean, I'm sure if you asked any artist that question, I'm sure they would say that they're seeing a therapist. Especially the newer generation coming up, there's a lot of guys that even come to my studio that go and see therapists. And the other thing that's good about the newer generation too, they're more open about it, so it's not as taboo as the older generations wouldn't even talk about it. It'd be like such a secret, or shame, that would be on therapy. But to your point, yeah, it's a loan. And if your money runs out and let's say you do have to go to a doctor or you want to seek more help, you could request money from a record label and they can supply it. Obviously, that goes back against your budget. You still have to pay it back. So,
and at the same time, you're still probably having to post something on Instagram, or you're having to do stuff on YouTube.
Yeah,
because then your fans are probably like, "Where'd they go? They disappeared." And then the rumor mill
because
starts.
as soon as you have that lag or lull, there's another artist there to take your place. I mean, there's an extraordinary number that was put out about songs released. I think it's about 50,000 new songs weekly that are put out. because of obviously access to technology. So
it's really like when these artists hit, it's really just not just their music anymore, but it's the grit and it's the package that you prepare, and it's being able to be mentally prepared, being your own sort of financial
yeah,
expert. And so what's the average age of an artist? Because like I have some of these skills, but I'm almost 50 years old. Like, and nobody's coming to me and being like, hey, you want to put out an album? Not that I have the skills for that, but the average age of an artist is what, like in their 20s?
I think in their 20s, because obviously it's a lot more, it's financially easier to do.
And
versus,
I just want
once
to
real
ask
life
this though,
comes.
because I'm thinking about myself right now. How financially savvy were you in your 20s?
Not financially savvy at all. So, but obviously, if I didn't have support of, I was fortunate to have support of, mom and dad who allowed me to have a studio in a basement. But
And what does rejection feel like in your 20s? Because I know what it felt like in my 20s. It felt like the end of the world, like I was going to die when people were mean to me. And now I'm just like, whatever. So it's got to be like kind of like,
yeah, well, you have
I
to get
can't
used to it.
imagine that many people saying things about my like body or the way that I look.
You have to get used to
or
it.
my music.
You have to get used to it, and that's really where the label gets that. They kind of have that, which isn't the right state of mind, is or trying to force that on artists, like, hey, you just got to work through it. But you eventually you do have to get used to it, because those things, they will affect you, especially in the beginning. Being, someone telling you it's not good, you have to get used to rejection and working past it. I mean, everyone that's in this industry has dealt with rejection in the beginning of their career and even as recent as yesterday, So, I mean, still to this day, I could turn something in and someone could be like, it's okay, or I'll give you an example. I would say in the last couple months, I came off like a good success, which would be considered a success in the music industry, is working on a record and getting it to chart. And I would say not even maybe a month later from that, I'm working on a mix for an independent artist, and they contact me and say, hey, we want to go with somebody else that worked with so-and-so. And I'm so used to it. I'm just like, okay, cool. I'll get you the files. But in my mind, I'm definitely like, the fuck? I don't have credits. Like, I'm like, who are you? But it's, if they're not happy, they're not happy. And, you just got to deal with that you're not going to be, that person all the time. And you got to be a team player. You got to deal with rejection and,
yeah, but so back to like the mental health piece, and just because we do talk health on here a lot, it does seem like we need to do better, especially for those who are new to work. And it seems like the music industry or the creative industry, youth sells, right? So we probably need to be more protective and understanding. What are you doing to like help those who come in here, or your artists? Do you like do anything like?
To be honest, the most I do is I'll have meetings. I'll have meetings. I'll have meetings and, talk through with some of those engineers. So I had a recent situation where we had a artist that was coming from a label that was booking a lot of time, but one of the engineers that was working one of the sessions was getting anxiety because there were so many people coming in on those sessions.
Gotcha.
So obviously, as a business, if I can't get someone to cover those sessions, I lose money and potentially lose a client. So what happened is I ended up, having a meeting with that engineer and another engineer and figuring out what I could do to relieve stress for him so he wouldn't have anxiety. So instead of maybe him sitting for 12 hours doing 12-hour sessions, we would limit his hourly, but we still, I still need his help,
Right.
and then also bringing in another engineer to relieve that. So those are things that like I could at least control. I can't say that I've have like a on staff therapist or have a network of therapists that I use. The only thing I try to do for the people that do work out of my studio is be empathetic to, what they're dealing with. So that's the best thing I could do as a business owner, instead of just like, hey, you're fired. You can't do the session. You're fired. It's like, okay, cool, let's try to work through this. Yeah.
And people are more stressed than ever before because there's so much more on their plate. Like, instead of just the music side or the engineering side, there's the social media side, even from production engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even your engineers have to sell themselves constantly, their beats and all those things. And I think since we do this for the general public doesn't really know sometimes the behind the scenes of all the stuff that happens in different spaces. And so that's what we try to share. And so the most important thing, and you and I have talked about this, is sometimes just being open to empathy and having conversations. That's the most important thing that we can probably do as a society too. Correct. For no matter where you're working, to be able to have difficult conversations about things that people, like when someone's being impacted by something, being able to say, hey, like, I noticed you seem different than you were the day before. Is there anything that I can help with? Or like, do you feel comfortable sharing with me what's going on? Because, you're not the same productive person or the person who was putting out so much before. And not everybody's open to doing that, though. So I think, what would you like to say to, other groups that are out there that are running studios and recording things? Like, what would you like to share with them about how they can be also more helpful? Because you're in Jersey, right? And like, that's a small piece of where people record. Yet we want people to feel safe wherever they are. What would you say to those who have other studios and things like that?
I mean, giving some input and advice is, just be empathetic to, the guys that are working on your studio. Because as a studio owner, you're not really a boss per se. You know what I mean? You basically have a place where you have self-contained people. It's almost like a barbershop. Like each barber is their own boss.
Right.
So you want to make an environment that's comfortable for these engineers, creatives, and artists.
And do you think you did that?
I think so, because I've had a long, obviously I've been open for a long time, and most of my guys have been with me for a very long time. I have two guys over 12 years, one guy over going on 5 years, another guy going over 1 year. Now I have had people pass through, but people still come back, and on the artist side, people that have been using this studio for a long time. So I think I have done that and created a culture that has been healthy.
And now I'm going to call you out or call you in the way that only a family sibling could. So I noticed you said the word guys a lot. Would you say that you have also been kind of affirming, is this a positive environment for women and women-bodied people or those who are gender diverse to kind of come and record? Do you feel like, because I'll be honest, the music industry is often seen as a toxic space full of toxic masculinity.
Right.
Have you tried to create that with the space that you have? Have you, and this is like a tough, because I know this is like a tough question, especially with the area that you record in.
Well, on staff right now, currently, besides who's running bookings, who is a female, yeah, majority of engineers are guys. I have had a female engineer for a short period, didn't work out. She went on to do other things. And not because of anything that was in the studio. It's just career choice for her. Um, Audio engineers, for the most part, do tend to be guys. It's not something that, um, for me as hiring, I want to hire guys, particularly like I have searched for female engineers, but
So note to everyone out there, he's if you want to come and you're local and you're good, uh, Shyboogs.
yeah, I've looked for female engineers in the past. I've had one. I've interviewed another. I do search for that because, like you said, it is a toxic environment, and I feel like a female engineer dealing with female clients is more comfortable for female artists. Now, do we make it a safe place for the female artists that do record with male engineers? Absolutely. But me personally, I would like that side because I do know a hard thing for female artists to find in this game is, comfortable spaces within studios where they don't feel like, that male is coming on to them or which is absolutely a distraction. You're trying to record your song and you got an engineer behind the glass, like looking at you Google eyes. Like that's insane. Should never happen. So.
Yeah. Because that's so important, especially women women are big buyers in the industry. We buy a lot of stuff. We listen to music, and we want safe spaces to be creative. So, that was the only reason I asked you that sort of tough question around that, like the safety piece and recording, and also access, like more access to different types of jobs. Especially in the engineering side, is so important. Thanks so much, Eddie, for being a guest. And don't forget, listeners, please subscribe, follow us, and you can find us anywhere that you get your podcasts. Thanks again for joining us for 52 weeks of health equity, and we'll see you next time.